Hi, this is Hal Helms. On April 7th, I posted a blog entry about form processing the OO way, and I know there was a lot of concepts, a lot of code in there. Might have been a little bit hard to follow, so I thought maybe a couple of video walkthroughs may help to clarify things. Here's my form on screen. This is what we're used to when we talk about a form, but I would like to suggest that we think about a form in an object-oriented manner. And by that I mean that this CFC, my form, represents the form. And what we see in the browser is merely a displayed representation of that form. Now, this form has three methods: display, which renders the form for a browser; populate, which accepts and stores user inputs; and then finally validate, which applies any required validation rules. First, let's look at the display method. And we can see that it includes two files, myFormCFM and myFormPGM. myFormCFM is nothing more than a simple HTML form. There's no code, there's no processing in this at all. This makes it ideal for handing off to a designer so that they can style it. myFormPGM has the processing code for the form. There's a CF-AJAX proxy tag that proxies the myForm CFC, and then down here we have some JavaScript code that we'll get to shortly. The form that we see on screen, as I said, is really a HTML representation of the form itself. It's been determined that this form will have some validation rules, and so if I submit the form without entering anything, validation does in fact occur, and I'll receive error messages for the invalid field entries. Now, as I entered valid entries and submit OK, the error messages go away. And then if I enter all of these correctly, and click OK, I get an alert box telling me that the form is processed. Now, of course, in real code, I'd likely send the user somewhere else, but we're working with demo code here, and I've tried to keep it as brief as possible. So where does the validation rules live, and how do they get applied? Well, that too is the job of myForm CFC. As I said, it's helpful to think of the CFC as the form itself. So here in myForm CFC, we have instance variables that correspond with the fields on the form, and each one of these is a structure. We have a value key where the user inputs will be placed, and then any rules that may be applied to this. Now, when the form is submitted, the populate method will be called, and you can see that there are arguments that correspond to the various form fields. The values that the user enters will be stored in that structure here in the value, and then for each field, one of the structure entries will be passed off to the validate method. Now, validate simply calls a third-party processor called validator CFC, which is very simple. It's just got some very generic rules so that, for example, we make sure that this has some length, that it is in fact, there's something there. In the next video, we'll take a look at more of the myForm PGM and see how all of this integrates.